Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about ICP, and as I mentioned in my first video, there's a lot to unpack here. So this will likely be the first in what I'd imagine to be a series of videos kind of diving deeper into ICP, because it is a very complex project, and what they're doing is really interesting. But I think, at least what I've seen as I've done more and more research on internet computer just overall, there is definitely a lot of misconceptions as far as what exactly it does, where the value lies exactly, at least in my opinion. You guys may think differently after watching this video, or maybe videos in the future as well. But I think it's definitely worth bringing up, some of the more nuanced points to what ICP is doing and how they're planning on doing it. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, first off, I wanted to show you Margex, because Margex I've been trading on pretty consistently over the past couple of weeks now, and I've been doing relatively well. I point this out because on Margex you can actually trade ICP on 25x leverage. So if you are pretty in tune with the ICP chart and you've been following it relatively closely, this might be a great place for you to do some trading and potentially scalp some short-term gains. As I've said before with Margex, there is no KYC or VPN required, so you can just create an account and get started trading, which is really cool, and it's also very convenient. I also think the UI is kind of nice. As you can see, this is a trading view plugin, so it's very familiar to probably what a lot of us are used to seeing. So go on ahead and look in the description, and you can find the link. It should be the first link in the description. If you are interested, using my link, you will get up to $10,000 in sign-up bonuses, as well as they are currently doing a $500,000 Caspa airdrop. So that's something that is definitely worthwhile if you are interested in wanting to trade. As we can see here, given that we do have the trading view plugin, I have started doing a lot of my charting just within Margex itself, and we can see I've kind of noted a couple of points of support and resistance. We were having kind of an overall trend line here that we did break out of, which I do think is actually pretty good news, and we can see that we're holding this line of support pretty well. So assuming we continue to hold this line of support, I do think it's possible that we could essentially start testing the next line of resistance up here at about 709, and if we break through that, back up to about 725, and then after that it'd probably be somewhere here in the 750 range. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. As you can see, I have been trading the market. These are some of my most recent trades. We can see I actually nailed the bottom on Bitcoin. Full disclosure, I did get liquidated once trying to catch the bottom, just because we did have that large drop. But as you can see, this more than made up for that liquidation. So yeah, I did that one. You see, I did also a similar one with ETH, catching the same drop. And then Jasmy, all of you who know, I'm a big fan of Jasmy. Jasmy was sitting in a wedge. I did talk about this earlier on the Jasmy video. Actually, I will go back to the chart so we can see. But obviously, the trade worked out relatively well. But if we look at Jasmy, you can see it was sitting in a wedge. I did draw this other line because I wasn't sure which wedge it would fall into. So I took a trade here. Obviously, that did not work out super well. So then I caught it on the bottom here and then rode it all the way up to the top of this wedge, which, as you can see, played out pretty much as we expected it. So I obviously have missed this trade. This actually has happened while I've been making this video, I think. So if it does bounce back down, I'll probably pull another on this line, and then we'll see. Again, same type of thing. If it were to break through, I'd be looking for a trade at this point as well. So anyway, I digress. Let's get into the video at hand. This is ICP, and essentially what is the difference? Because people always say, oh, ICP is just like the decentralized internet, right? Totally fair. Except for the fact that the internet is decentralized, right? The internet was created as a decentralized network. And so when people make the claim that the internet is centralized, that, I don't know. I don't really let people get away with that, because that's just not true, right? So what is the true difference between ICP and the internet? Because I definitely do think there is value in ICP, and I'm not saying that ICP is a scam or anything like that. There definitely is value, but I think a lot of it is misconstrued as to where that value is placed, right? And so I wanted to dive into that today and go over the true differences between the internet and ICP, so we can truly understand where the value lies and what the nuance between the two are. So going back over here to look at a chart here, this is actually Simon Houghton. Hopefully I pronounced his name correctly. But he actually created this little infographic, which I think is super useful. So you can see right here, this is a link to his website if you want to go check it out. But this is a really useful infographic that I wanted to share, because I think it pretty simply and also pretty accurately points out how the internet works, right? And so what we can see is, obviously, if we're trying to do something on the internet, we've got our Wi-Fi signal, and then the Wi-Fi router is connected to a modem, and then the modem is connected to telephone cables, right? Telephone cables essentially bring it to like a telephone exchange or like an internet exchange, which then essentially pipes all this information into these massive fiber optic wires that run throughout the world. So I don't know if you knew that, but like there actually is a massive fiber optic wire running along the bottom of the ocean in the northern Atlantic and the southern Atlantic and all over to connect places in the world, because the throughput of satellites is not high enough. That may change in the future, but at least currently there are these cables that are lying on the ocean floor throughout the world to connect the world. So anyway, once your information is there, it gets shipped around to wherever you're going to go, or essentially wherever the server that the data is hosted in goes. And then that's where, you know, web developers have their apps, and that's where all the apps sit, and they stay on the web, and, you know, they do whatever they're going to do and then send all the information back to you through the same route. So that's pretty much how the internet works, right? ICP has also a section on their website talking about how it works, but as you can see, it's very, very technical, and it actually goes into more of the more fine-grained details between specific nuances of the internet versus ICP. So I think it's easier to use this dashboard to kind of big picture talk about what the differences are. I do think this is part of like my multi-video plan, right? Because I do think this is something that we'll go over in the future and cover some more fine details. But I figured before we got into that, we should at least understand conceptually the differences between the internet and ICP and what is the problem they're trying to solve, right? And so what we can see here, if we look at this map, I don't know if I guess I can move it around, but I can't enlarge it. So as we can see on the map, there's nodes essentially interspersed throughout the entire world. Currently, there are 1,469 of them, and there are 559 subnets, which essentially is like mini clusters of these nodes. So cool. That essentially is kind of how the internet works, right? I mean, you connect to these machines that are set up interspersed throughout the world in a somewhat decentralized format. Anybody can set up a web server on the internet, just like anybody can set up a web server on ICP. And actually, I would say the internet in its current form, though very centralized, might actually be more decentralized, because anybody can set, like if I want to go host a server on the internet, I could go do that and set that up right now, right? Like that's totally possible. With ICP, you do actually need to be voted in by the DAO. So that is something where it's like there's almost a higher barrier to entry. I would imagine as the network starts to scale and continues to scale, maybe that gets reduced, or like the threshold is lowered in some capacity. But at least overall right now, like the fundamental network of how ICP and the internet work are exactly the same, right? And now to be clear, the difference of ICP is how these are linked together, right? Because what we have for the internet is they have like linking protocols, right? They've got HTTPS, ICP. Like I'm not an internet wizard, so I don't know all of like what TCP versus ICP or all this type of stuff like means, but I know that essentially that is how the internet is like webbed together, right? And so what we're trying to do right now with Web3 and blockchain is essentially you have to intermingle your data with the currently existing infrastructure. And so if you were to think about like, let's think about like a standard dApp that might be built on Ethereum right now. The compute that's actually done on that app right now is transaction, or like, I guess you could say ledger only, right? So like, let's say you're swapping from, me to you. Well, that's the only thing that's going to be recorded within Ethereum, right? If there was some sort of transaction or computation that needed to happen to figure out what that exchange was, that was all done through, in most cases, probably AWS, right? So essentially all of the compute was done on AWS. And now that's not inherently problematic, right? I mean, obviously we know AWS owns the majority of web hosting servers, at least in the US. I would imagine worldwide, but I don't know that for sure. Like, people always say, well, we got to get away from AWS because AWS could just shut all their web servers off. 100%, of course they could. But if I also owned 80% of ICP's web servers, I could do the same thing, right? So that risk isn't necessarily mitigated by ICP, but there's a different risk that I think is truly what is being solved here. And that is the like proof of compute, or the security of compute, right? Because if I have some smart contract or some dApp that is working within this current infrastructure, I'm essentially trusting AWS that if I tell them to make some certain formula, that they're not going to mess with it. They're just going to take the formula, compute it, and then send it back. That's the trust that I am placing in them to do that, right? I would say at this point in time, they probably have no reason to mess it up intentionally. Now, there are potential ways where it could be messed up unintentionally, but I kind of doubt that. But ultimately, what we're looking at here is AWS could, like maliciously or otherwise, mess up the computation there. And so what ICP does, and I think the really interesting thing about ICP is they're building a blockchain at the fundamental layer of the internet, right? The internet currently does not have blockchain at the fundamental layer, so we have to essentially do the translation. We have to essentially on-chain, compute off-chain, bring it back on-chain. Where if ICP was the fundamental layer, everything computes on-chain, and it's easier to prove that these transactions were being done correctly. An easier way to maybe simplify this or break it down would be like web development, right? If we think about, like if I want to make a website, I can go and write the HTML code and make a website, right? Obviously that's harder, it takes more time, and ultimately it's kind of difficult. Or I could use like a Wix or a Squarespace or a WordPress or something of that nature. And what that would allow me to do is essentially say, hey, I want to do this. Or even in more probably recent and relevant terms, you have some of these ChatGPT type things, right? You've got Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, all these different ones. And you can say, hey, write me a code that does this. And now what you're doing is, as somebody who doesn't understand either web development or coding or whatever, you're hoping essentially that what they're giving you, the answer that they're giving you, is correct. And there's no way to really prove that it is. You just have to trust that it is. And ICP, I think the problem that they're really trying to solve here with the architecture that they're laying out is the proof that it's correct, right? So the risk still remains that somebody could own 80% of ICP's nodes. I mean, granted, if the DAO continues to remain in place, maybe they would catch that before it happened. But theoretically, uninhibited in a truly decentralized manner, somebody could grow to own 80% of the nodes just by doing something at a scale that makes it cheaper for everybody, right? That's why Amazon owns 80%, is because they just do it cheaper than everybody else, so it makes sense. So this is something that still could happen, but what couldn't happen is them if they were to maliciously start injecting code or producing wrong outputs, things like that. That's something that they couldn't do. So this, I think, is kind of where the value of ICP lies, not necessarily in the decentralization, because the internet's already decentralized. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up, kind of going over the differences between, hopefully this made sense. ICP is an incredibly complex project that is incredibly complex to understand, much less explain. So hopefully it made sense. Obviously, I'm continuing to do my research and get a better understanding of some of these more technically nuanced ideals. But part of what that involves is I almost need to become an expert on the internet to then also understand the difference of ICP and why it makes sense. So, some of these videos may take me a little bit longer to get out, and some of it hopefully is explained clearly, but if it's not, please just, ask questions in the comments below. If it's something I know the answer to, I'll respond immediately. If it's something that's maybe widely unclarified or something, maybe I'll create a follow-up video to clarify it, something like that. But ultimately, hopefully this information was helpful and it was useful for you all. I think ICP is something that is definitely potentially a revolutionary technology, but the misconceptions and kind of some of the misunderstandings that I'm seeing throughout, the YouTubes and the Twitterverse and all this type of stuff, I do think it warrants maybe a little bit extra explanation and detail diving into it, because, some of the risks need to be understood, and some of the reasonings for why people might be investing, I don't want them to be confused, essentially. So if this information was useful, please do leave me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. This is still a relatively new channel. I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of October. Given the growth and the pace that I'm going at right now, I'm hoping to do it by the end of September. I think that'd be really great. And also, like I said, I want to make sure if people are investing, they're at least making informed decisions based on the research that I'm doing and the information I'm able to find. Again, nobody should be making investment decisions based off my information alone. I'm just trying to help kind of demystify some of the differences that are going on here, because ICP is really a pretty complex project overall, and so I want to make sure that continues to be clarified. Also, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything like that, please do feel free to leave me a comment below as well. I do interact with all of my comments. I reply and read them and all that type of stuff. So if you have anything, like I said, that was confusing or you want more clarity on, please do just ask the question. Also, if you just want to talk with me, would love to just talk back. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.